massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep hum that seemed to shake the very walls. Admiral Jake Morrison walked through first, his black uniform crisp and his medals catching the strange blue light that filled the enormous room. Behind him came Ambassador Lisa Carter, her diplomatic robes flowing as she tried to match his confident stride. Both humans looked small in the vast space that stretched up into darkness above them. The Council of Seven sat on curved platforms that floated high above the floor. Each alien race had their own section, and each looked down at the two humans with expressions that ranged from mild curiosity to obvious disgust. Morrison had been in many difficult meetings before, but nothing quite like this. The Zephyrian spoke first. Their leader was 12 feet tall with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. When he spoke, his voice echoed through hidden speakers placed around the chamber. "Humans of Terra," he began, his tone formal and cold, "you have requested to join our coalition against the coming threat. We have considered your request." Ambassador Carter stepped forward slightly. She had practiced this moment for months, running through every possible response and counterargument. "Honored Council, humanity brings unique strengths to any alliance. Our rapid technological advancement and adaptability could prove valuable. In the coming war, a sound like breaking glass filled the air. It came from the Crystalline Hierarchies section, where beings made of living rock communicated through harmonic vibrations. The translation came through the speakers a moment later. "Adaptation is chaos. Order defeats chaos. Humans bring only disorder." Morrison felt his jaw tighten, but forced himself to remain still. He had expected resistance, but the dismissal in their translated words stung more than he had anticipated. These aliens had been fighting wars for thousands of years, while humans had barely left their home solar system 4 centuries ago. The Zephyrian leader continued. "Your species has been in space for only 400 of your years. We have defended this galaxy for over 3,000. The Void Swarm represents a threat beyond your comprehension. They consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space. This is not a conflict for young species." "Young does not mean weak," Carter replied, her diplomatic training keeping her voice level. "Humanity has faced extinction before and survived. We have fought wars across our entire planet and learned from each conflict. That experience could serve the coalition well." Another species spoke up from the shadows. The Veil Walkers rarely showed themselves fully, appearing as shifting patches of darkness with glowing eyes. Their representative's voice was like whispers in an empty room. "Your wars were against your own kind. Primitive conflicts. The Swarm is something else entirely. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They consume." His military bearing evident in every word. "With respect, we may be new to space, but we are not new to fighting for survival. Every human alive today exists because our ancestors refused to give up when faced with impossible odds. That is exactly the kind of determination you need in this war." The chamber fell silent for a long moment. Morrison could hear his own heartbeat in the quiet.
Ow.
Wowner. What a manner my one I'll lie to rilla now I to die on with son I don't run around when rare I don't know and I want to run to winger I career Determination is admirable, Admiral Morrison. But this conflict requires more than courage. It requires technology your species does not possess. It requires tactical knowledge gained over millennia. It requires unity of command that your chaotic nature cannot provide. Our nature is not chaotic, Carter protested. It is adaptive. When our strategies fail, we create new ones. When our weapons prove inadequate, we build better ones. When our enemies surprise us, we surprise them back. The crystalline being spoke again, the sound of its voice like stones grinding together. Surprise is inefficiency. Perfect strategy eliminates surprise. Humans cannot achieve perfect strategy because they cannot achieve perfect order. Morrison looked up at the floating platforms, taking in each alien representative. The Zephyrians, with their technological superiority, the crystalline hierarchy, with their mathematical precision, the Veil Walkers with their ancient wisdom, the Bio-Collective with their hive mind coordination, the energy dancers who existed as pure thought, the star shepherds who moved planets like chess pieces. Each species had evolved along different paths, but they all shared one thing. They looked at humanity and saw primitives. "But you speak of order and perfection," Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly in the vast chamber. "But the enemy you face is neither ordered nor perfect. The void swarm adapts as it consumes. It learns from each victory. How do you fight an enemy that becomes stronger with every battle, unless you can become stronger too?" The Zephyrian leaders. Glowing skin pulsed brighter for a moment. "Oh, we have studied the swarm for decades. Our combined fleets represent the most advanced military force this galaxy has ever assembled. Our energy weapons can destroy entire moons. Our shields can withstand the explosion of stars. What can humanity offer that we lack?" "Something you cannot calculate or measure," Carter said quietly. "Desperation. When everything else fails, humans keep fighting, not because we have a logical plan, but because we refuse to accept defeat." A new voice entered the conversation. The Bio-Collective's representative was a mass of writhing tentacles and glowing organs suspended in a transparent tank. When it spoke, the words seemed to come from everywhere at once. Desperation leads to errors. Errors lead to defeat. The collective has analyzed human military history. Your species excels at destroying itself but lacks the discipline for coordinated galactic warfare. Morrison felt anger building in his chest, but pushed it down. Getting emotional would only prove their point. "You have analyzed our conflicts against ourselves. But you have not seen us fight alongside allies we trust. You have not seen what humans can do when we have something to protect besides our own territory." "The decision has been made," the Zephyrian leader announced, his voice cutting through any further argument. "The Terran Federation is too young, too unstable, and too primitive to contribute meaningfully to this conflict. You will defend your own systems as you see fit, but you will not be granted access to coalition technology, strategy, or command structure." The words hit Morrison like a physical blow. Months of preparation, years of diplomatic work, and decades of proving human capability in smaller conflicts, all dismissed in a single sentence. Carter's face had gone pale, but she maintained her composure. "If you reconsider," she said formally, "humanity stands ready to serve alongside any who would accept us." "There will be no reconsideration," came the reply. "The void swarm approaches from beyond the galactic rim. Our combined fleets will meet. Them at the outer systems, Earth, and its colonies will be informed if evacuation becomes necessary." The floating platforms began to move, carrying the alien representatives away from the chamber floor. The audience was over. Morrison and Carter stood alone in the vast space, the weight of rejection settling over them like a heavy blanket as they walked back toward the exit. Morrison could not shake the feeling that the aliens were making a terrible mistake. They saw humanity's youth and inexperience, but they missed something crucial. Every species in the galaxy had evolved to fill specific niches, developing specialized abilities over thousands of years. But humans had evolved as generalists, capable of adapting to any environment, any challenge, any enemy. The Galactic Council wanted order and predictability. They wanted to fight the Void Swarm using established tactics and proven strategies. But Morrison suspected that an enemy capable of consuming entire civilizations would not be defeated by conventional warfare. As the doors closed behind them, cutting off the chamber's eerie blue light, Morrison made a decision that would change the course of the coming war. If the galaxy would not let humanity fight as allies, then humanity would fight alone. And when the ordered, predictable strategies of the ancient races failed against an enemy that thrived on chaos, the galaxy would learn what it meant to underestimate the newest species to reach for the stars. The rejection was complete, but the real war was just beginning. 3 weeks after the rejection at Nexus Prime, General Marcus Stone stood in the underground command center beneath Denver. The room buzzed with activity as officers moved between holographic displays showing star maps, fleet positions, and resource allocations. Stone had called this meeting within hours of receiving Admiral Morrison's report from the Galactic Council. "They think we are too primitive," Stone said to the assembled commanders. "They believe 400 years in space makes us children compared to their thousands." Oh. But they made one critical error in their assessment. Colonel Amy Brooks looked up from her datapad. She had been working non-stop since the rejection, coordinating with military installations across human space. "What error is that, sir?" "They assume we have been sitting quietly in our corner of the galaxy, building nothing but basic ships and simple weapons." Stone activated a holographic display that showed dozens of hidden facilities scattered across human territory. "Do not know about Project Blackout." The room fell silent. Project Blackout had been humanity's most classified program for over a decade. While the aliens saw humans as newcomers building standard starships and establishing normal colonies, the truth was far different. Humanity had been preparing for war since their first contact with alien technology. On Mars Base Alpha, Colonel Brooks oversaw the most important part of that preparation. The red planet's surface looked normal from orbit, dotted with the usual mining operations and research stations. But deep beneath the Martian soil, human engineers had been working around the clock on something the galaxy had never seen. Tony Garcia wiped sweat from his forehead as he examined the latest weapon prototype. The fusion-powered kinetic accelerator looked simple enough, resembling a large rifle with additional power cells. But the technology inside represented years of reverse engineering captured alien equipment combined with uniquely human innovation. "The Zephyrians use plasma weapons," Garcia explained to his team. "Beautiful energy beams that can cut through most armor. The problem is that plasma can be absorbed, redirected, or neutralized by the right defensive systems. But you cannot absorb a chunk of metal moving at 30% of light speed." His assistant, Dr. Kevin Walsh, nodded as he checked the targeting computer. "The aliens have been fighting each other for so long that they all developed similar technologies. Energy weapons, energy shields, energy everything. They have never faced an enemy that simply throws rocks at them really, really fast." Walsh had made another crucial discovery during his research. While working on faster-than-light communication systems, he had noticed something strange about human neural patterns. Every alien species they studied showed highly organized thought processes, almost like biological computers running specific programs. Human brains were different. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and capable of making intuitive leaps that no alien could follow. "Our minds work differently," Walsh explained to Lieutenant Commander Nina Torres during one of their research sessions. "When we connect human consciousness to artificial intelligence systems, something unique happens. The AI becomes more creative, more adaptable. It starts thinking like us, instead of like a computer." Torres had been testing this discovery with combat simulations. Human pilots connected to AI-enhanced fighters performed impossible maneuvers, making split-second decisions that confused even the most advanced alien tactical programs. "It is like the AI learns to be human," she said, reviewing the test results. "It starts taking risks, trying new approaches, breaking its own rules to win." Meanwhile, pilot Alex Chen was pushing human reflexes to their absolute limits. The flight training facility on Europa had been modified to simulate combat against alien spacecraft. Chen and his squadron flew missions against computer-controlled enemies programmed with actual alien tactical data. "The crystalline ships move in perfect geometric formations," Chen reported after another training session. "Beautiful to watch, but completely predictable. Zephyrians prefer sweeping energy attacks that look impressive but leave them exposed. None of them expect an enemy to fly straight at them while spinning and firing in all directions. Chen's unorthodox tactics had evolved from studying Earth's aerial predators. Humans had learned to hunt in 3 dimensions by watching birds, and those same instincts translated perfectly to space combat. While alien pilots flew like they were driving vehicles on invisible roads, human pilots flew like they were hunting prey. Back on Earth, Admiral Morrison reviewed reports from all the hidden projects. The scale of human preparation was staggering. Every colony, every military base, every research station had been working toward this moment. Not the moment when humanity would be accepted into the Galactic Coalition, but the moment when they would prove their worth through action. How long? Until we are ready? Morrison asked General Stone during their weekly briefing. We have been ready for months, Stone replied. The question is whether we will get the chance to show what we can do before it is too late. Dr. Helen Cross had been monitoring galactic communications from her research station on Luna. As humanity's leading expert on alien behavior, she'd been tracking the Coalition's preparations for war. What she discovered was troubling. They are making the same mistakes they always make, Cross reported to the command staff. The Zephyrians want to fight a clean, technological war using superior firepower. The crystalline hierarchy believes perfect coordination will overcome any enemy. The Bio-Collective thinks they can out-evolve any threat. None of them are preparing for an enemy that does not follow their rules. Cross had studied the limited data available about the Void Swarm. The reports from scout ships that barely escaped contact painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had faced. The swarm did not use traditional technology. Instead, they seemed to absorb and repurpose whatever they encountered, growing stronger with each victory. This enemy adapts, Cross explained. They learn from every encounter. The Coalition's plan. To meet them with overwhelming force will only teach the swarm how to counter overwhelming force. They need to be fought with tactics that constantly change, weapons that cannot be easily countered, and strategies that make no logical sense. Major Don Kim had been studying human military history for patterns that might apply to galactic warfare. What he found confirmed Cross's assessment. Every time humans faced a superior enemy, we won by doing things they did not expect, used terrain they ignored, weapons they had never seen, and tactics they could not predict. The aliens are right. About one thing, we are chaotic. But chaos might be exactly what this war needs. The final piece of human preparation came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Grace Miller had volunteered for experimental neural enhancement procedures designed to interface with alien technology. The process was dangerous and largely untested, but Miller had insisted on trying. Something strange happens when I connect to alien systems, Miller reported after her latest session. Their computers are designed for ordered, logical minds. When my chaotic human consciousness interfaces with them, it creates what the technicians call static in their networks. I can disrupt their communications, confuse their sensors, even take control of their systems by thinking in ways they never programmed for. As reports from all these projects flowed into the command center, Morrison began to see the shape of humanity's true strength. The aliens had rejected humans for being too young, too chaotic, too primitive. But those same qualities might be the key to victory against an enemy that thrived on absorbing and countering conventional tactics. Then the emergency signal arrived. The message came through quantum channels. From deep space monitoring stations, the Void Swarm had been detected at the galaxy's rim, moving faster than expected. They would arrive at the first inhabited systems in weeks, not months. Morrison looked at the tactical display showing human ships scattered across dozens of systems. Each vessel was equipped with weapons the aliens had never seen, crewed by pilots trained to fight in ways no other species could imagine, and commanded by officers who had spent their entire careers preparing for exactly this moment. Send word. To all commands, Morrison ordered. Operation Harbinger is now active. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you underestimate humanity. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was ready to fight it their way. The first reports came from the Outer Rim colonies at exactly 0347 Galactic Standard Time. Long-range sensors detected massive objects emerging from dark space beyond the galaxy's edge. Within minutes, those objects resolved into something that defied every military analyst's worst predictions. The Void Swarm was not a fleet in any conventional sense. Instead of ships, they appeared as writhing masses of biomechanical tissue that moved through space like living creatures. Each swarm cluster was the size of a small moon, pulsing with dark energy and trailing smaller organisms behind it like a grotesque tail. "Commander?" Pete Davis watched the sensor readings from his position aboard the stealth ship Defiance. Crew had been monitoring the galaxy's edge for weeks, hidden among the asteroid fields of the Kepler system. When the first swarm cluster appeared on their screens, Davis had to check the readings 3 times before believing what he saw. "Sir, the energy signatures are off the charts," reported his sensor officer. "These things are not using any technology we recognize. They seem to be generating power from ... nothing, like they are feeding on space itself." Davis activated the quantum communication linked to Fleet Command. "Control, this is Defiance. The swarm has arrived. Sending full sensor data now. You are not going to believe what we are seeing out here." The Coalition forces had positioned themselves at the rim, systems ready to meet the invasion with overwhelming firepower. The Zephyrian 7th Fleet, pride of the galactic military, moved into attack formation with their massive dreadnoughts leading the charge. Each ship gleamed like a blue star, their plasma cannons charging for the first salvo. Admiral Kethmer of the Zephyrians had fought in 17 major conflicts over his 3-century career. He had never lost a battle, and he did not intend to start now. "All ships, prepare for coordinated assault. Target the largest cluster first. We'll show these invaders the power of civilized warfare." The first engagement lasted exactly 11 minutes. The Zephyrian plasma barrage struck the lead swarm cluster with enough energy to vaporize a planet. The beams carved glowing channels through the creature's mass, causing sections to break away and drift in space. For a moment, it seemed like the Coalition's superior technology would carry the day. Then the scattered pieces began to move, instead of dying. The fragments of the swarm cluster absorbed the plasma energy and used it to grow. Within minutes, what had been one massive creature became dozens of smaller ones, each pulsing with the same dark energy as the original, but now enhanced with Zephyrian plasma technology. "Possible," Admiral Kethmer whispered, as his sensors showed the multiplication. "Effect. Our weapons are feeding them." The counterattack came without warning. The newly formed swarm creatures launched projectiles that looked like living metal, twisting and changing shape as they flew. When they struck the Zephyrian shields, they did not explode or dissipate. Instead, they burrowed through the energy. Barriers like parasites, emerging inside to tear apart the ship's hull from within. Captain Sarah Johnson monitored the battle from her position aboard the observation vessel Ranger. Her orders were to watch and report, nothing more. Humanity was not supposed to be involved in this fight. But as she watched the Coalition's finest ships being consumed by an enemy that grew stronger with each attack, she felt sick to her stomach. "The Zephyrians are falling back," reported her tactical officer. "They have lost 6 dreadnoughts in the first wave. The survivors are trying to regroup, but those creatures are following them." Johnson switched her view screen to show the crystalline hierarchy's forces. If the Zephyrians represented advanced technology, the crystalline beings represented perfect strategy. Their ships moved in mathematical precision, each vessel positioned exactly where tactical doctrine demanded. Their formation was a thing of beauty, a geometric pattern that maximized firepower while minimizing vulnerability. It lasted 4 minutes against the swarm. The crystalline ships fired in perfect synchronization, their energy beams creating a web of destruction that should have annihilated anything in its path. But the swarm clusters did not behave like normal enemies. Instead of trying to avoid the attack pattern, they deliberately flew into it, absorbing the energy and using it to spawn new creatures that emerged already adapted to crystalline weapons. "Major." Don Kim watched from another monitoring post as the perfect formations crumbled. "They are learning faster than the Coalition can adapt," he reported to command. "Every weapon used against them becomes part of their arsenal. Every tactic tried against them gets countered within minutes." The BioCollective tried next, sending forth clouds of engineered organisms designed to consume enemy technology. The hive mind that controlled billions of creatures had never encountered a foe it could not out-evolve. But when their bioweapons made contact with the swarm, something terrible happened. The swarm absorbed the biocollective's creatures and turned them against their creators. Worse, they gained access to the hive mind communication network, spreading chaos through the collective's ranks. Ships began attacking each other as corrupted signals flooded their neural links. Dr. Helen cross-monitored these developments from her research station, her worst fears being confirmed with each passing hour. "They are not just adapting to our weapons," she transmitted to Admiral Morrison. "They are learning our psychology, our tactics, our entire way of thinking. The more organized the attack, the faster they counter it." The Veilwalkers, ancient masters of stealth and surprise, fared no better. Their ships could phase in and out of normal space, appearing without warning to strike at enemy weak points. But the swarm seemed to exist partially outside normal reality. Sensing the Veilwalker ships even when they were phased, the ambush tactics that had worked for millennia became death traps, as the swarm learned to predict and counter each stealth attack. By the end of the first day, 3 coalition fleets had been destroyed or scattered. The survivors retreated to defensive positions around major population centers, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. The swarm had demonstrated that conventional tactics and weapons were worse than useless. They were actually helping the enemy grow stronger. Commander Davis, still hidden in the asteroid field, watched a particularly large swarm cluster consume the remains of a Zephyrian battle station. The creature wrapped itself around the metal structure like a giant mouth, breaking it down at the molecular level and incorporating useful materials into its own mass. Within hours, the station's defensive weapons had been absorbed and repurposed, appearing as grotesque growths along the creature's hull. "Command, this is Defiance," Davis transmitted. "The enemy has taken the Corvain system. All coalition forces in the sector have been destroyed or have fled. The swarm is moving toward the core worlds. At current rate of advance, they will reach the major population centers within 6 days." The response came from Admiral Morrison himself. "Understood, Defiance. Continue monitoring, but do not engage. Repeat, do not engage under any circumstances." Davis looked at his crew, seeing the same frustration in their eyes that he felt in his heart. They were soldiers, trained to fight, equipped to make a difference, but their orders were clear. Humanity was to observe only then. The emergency transmission arrived from Nexus Prime. The signal was weak and filled with static, coming from the same council chamber where humanity had been rejected weeks earlier. Ambassador Carter's voice was barely recognizable through the interference. "This is Nexus Prime to any human vessels in range. The Coalition command structure has collapsed. The Zephyrian fleet is gone. Crystalline formations have been shattered. We need your help. Please respond." There was a long pause, filled only with the crackle of damaged communication equipment. Then Carter's voice came through again, quieter now, almost defeated. "We were wrong about you. About your capabilities. The enemy we face. It cannot be fought with conventional methods. It learns too fast, adapts too quickly. We need something different. We need chaos to fight chaos." Johnson looked at her communications officer. "Sir, should we respond?" Before she could answer, another voice cut through the static. It was Admiral Morrison, broadcasting on all human frequencies. "This is Admiral Morrison, to all human forces. The Coalition has requested our assistance. But before we answer that request, I want everyone to remember what they told us 3 weeks ago. They said we were too primitive for galactic warfare. They said our chaotic nature made us unsuitable for civilized conflict. They said we lacked the sophistication to contribute meaningfully to this war." The channel fell silent for a moment. Then Morrison continued, his voice carrying a cold edge that made every human listener sit up straighter. "They were right about one thing. We are not civilized warriors. We do not fight clean technological wars using superior firepower. We do not rely on perfect formations or ancient wisdom. When humanity fights, we fight dirty, desperate, and without rules." Johnson found herself holding her breath, waiting for the Admiral's next words, The galaxy is burning, Morrison said finally. The enemy grows stronger with every conventional attack. As the coalition's ordered, predictable strategies have failed completely, so now they want to see what chaos can do against chaos. Very well. The first sign that something had changed came from the Theta sector, where a massive swarm cluster had been feeding on the remains of a crystalline research station. The creature had grown to enormous size, incorporating the station's geometric architecture into its own twisted form. Confident in its invulnerability after days of absorbing every weapon fired at it, then something hit it. From behind at impossible speed, the projectile was nothing more than a chunk of tungsten steel, but it was moving at 35% of light speed. It punched through the creature's biomechanical hull like a bullet through paper, creating a tunnel of destruction that ran from one end of the beast to the other. The swarm cluster writhed in apparent agony, dark fluid leaking from the wound. Before it could recover, a second projectile hit it from a different angle, then a third. Within minutes, the creature that had seemed unstoppable was breaking apart, its pieces drifting dead in space from the bridge of the stealth cruiser Liberty. Captain Ryan Bell watched the destruction with grim satisfaction. "Target destroyed," he reported to his crew. "Kinetic rounds are effective. The enemy cannot absorb raw momentum." Bell's ship was painted matte black and ran completely silent, invisible to most detection systems. It had been hiding in the shadow of a dead moon for hours, waiting for the perfect shot. Out. Moved again, seeking its next target. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. As human ships emerged from hiding places the aliens had never imagined, they came from asteroid fields, gas giant atmospheres, and the dark spaces between stars. Each ship struck without warning, using weapons the swarm had never encountered before. Sergeant Maria Lopez led her Marine squad through the corridors of a space station that had been partially consumed by swarm organisms. The biomechanical growths covered the walls like cancer, pulsing with their own dark light. Standard procedure would have been to retreat and call for orbital bombardment, but humans did not follow standard procedure. "Flame units, advance," Lopez ordered. Her Marines carried weapons that would have horrified the civilized species of the galaxy. Chemical flamethrowers, high explosive charges, and old-fashioned projectile weapons that worked by throwing sharp metal very fast. The swarm organisms had learned to absorb energy weapons, redirect plasma beams, and neutralize particle cannons, but they had no defense against napalm. The flames spread through the biological mass, causing it to writhe and contract. Where the fire touched, the alien tissue died and did not regenerate. "These things have never faced anything like us," Lopez reported as her squad cleared another section. "They adapt to technology, but we are not fighting them with technology. We are fighting them with fire and steel and explosives. They cannot adapt to being burned alive." Lieutenant Commander Nina Torres sat in the neural interface pod of her experimental fighter, her consciousness merged with the ship's artificial intelligence. The combination of human intuition and computer processing power created something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Torres dove her fighter through a swarm of smaller creatures, her weapons firing in patterns that seemed random but were actually based on hunting instincts millions of years old. She rolled and twisted through three-dimensional space like a dolphin through water, her movements impossible for the enemy to predict. "The creatures are trying to match my flight patterns," she reported, her voice coming through the neural link. "But every time they think they have figured me out, I change tactics. Human pilots do not fly in formations or follow doctrine. We improvise." The swarm organisms had been designed to counter logical, predictable opponents. They analyzed attack patterns, identified weaknesses, and adapted accordingly. But human tactics were not logical. They were instinctive, emotional, and utterly chaotic. Captain Tim Anderson led a squadron of fighters against a cluster of swarm interceptors. Instead of maintaining formation like civilized pilots, the humans scattered in all directions, each pilot following their own instincts. They flew through debris fields that should have been impossible to navigate, used gravitational slings around asteroids to change direction without warning, and fired their weapons while spinning end over end. "They cannot track us," Anderson reported as his squadron tore through the enemy formation. "We are not flying like machines. We're flying like animals hunting prey." Dr. Kevin Walsh monitored the battle from his command center, watching as human forces engaged the swarm across multiple star systems. What he saw confirmed his theories about human neural patterns and their effect on artificial intelligence. "The enemy is becoming confused," Walsh reported to Admiral Morrison. "Our hive mind communication network is designed for ordered, logical thinking. Our chaotic thought patterns are creating interference in their signals. They are starting to make mistakes." The most dramatic example came from Lieutenant Grace Miller, who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of the war. She sat in a specially modified pod that could interface directly with alien computer systems, her enhanced neural implants allowing her to invade enemy networks through pure thought. Miller closed her eyes and projected her consciousness into the swarm cluster's communication network. She found was a vast, organized intelligence that processed information with perfect efficiency. But when her chaotic human thoughts entered the system, everything changed. "It is like throwing a wrench into machinery," Miller reported, her voice strained with effort. "Their hive mind cannot process human thought patterns. It can create loops in their logic, make them doubt their own decisions, even turn parts of the swarm against itself." The results were visible across the battlefield. Swarm creatures that had moved with perfect coordination began to stumble and collide with each other. Their attacks became unfocused, their formations broke apart. And for the first time since the invasion began, they showed signs of genuine confusion. General Marcus Stone watched the tactical displays from his command center, seeing the tide of battle slowly but surely beginning to turn. Human forces were scattered across dozens of systems, each group fighting its own war against the swarm. There was no grand strategy, no coordinated battle plan, no supreme commander directing the action. It was pure chaos, and it was working. "Aliens were right about us," Stone said to his staff. "We are too chaotic for civilized warfare. But this is not civilized warfare. This is survival, and humans are very good at survival." Commander Pete Davis, still hidden in his asteroid field, watched a human assault team board a partially consumed space station. Instead of using airlocks and following safety protocols, the Marines simply blew holes in the hull and went in shooting. They moved through the corridors like urban warfare specialists, clearing rooms with tactics developed in Earth's bloodiest conflicts. "They are treating this like a building-to-building fight in a destroyed city," Davis observed. "Room clearing, close-quarters combat, improvised explosives. The swarm has never faced an enemy that fights like street gangsters." The breakthrough came when Captain Sarah Johnson's team discovered the swarm's critical vulnerability. While monitoring a battle in the Vegas system, her sensors detected something unusual in the enemy's communication patterns. "A weakness," Johnson reported. "When we create enough chaos in their network, they lose coordination. But more than that, they start to doubt their own perceptions. Human unpredictability is not just confusing them, it is making them afraid." Fear was something the swarm had never experienced. It had been created to consume and adapt, to face any threat with perfect confidence in their ability to overcome it. But humans did not behave like any threat they had encountered before. Humans were unpredictable, irrational, and seemingly immune to the psychological warfare that the swarm used to break other species. Admiral Morrison received reports from across the galaxy as human forces continued their unconventional assault. Ships that should have been destroyed were somehow surviving by doing things no sane pilot would attempt. Marines were clearing space stations using tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Pilots were engaging enemy formations with maneuvers that defied physics and common sense. Status report Morrison requested from his flagship. "Sir, we have engaged the enemy in 47 separate systems," came the reply. "Our losses are within acceptable parameters, but more importantly, we are winning. The swarm is retreating from several sectors." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy had rejected humanity for being too primitive, too chaotic, too unpredictable. They had been right about all of those things. But those same qualities were exactly what was needed to fight an enemy that had never faced an opponent willing to ignore every rule of engagement. "Send word to all human forces," Morrison ordered. "Continue the assault. Show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate a species that learned to survive by being too stubborn to die." The war was far from over, but for the first time since the swarm's arrival, the galaxy had hope. And that hope were the chaotic, unpredictable, utterly human face of a species that refused to fight fair. 3 months after humanity entered the war, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the flagship Indomitable, watching the final battle unfold in the Andromeda Spiral. Before him, the last and largest swarm hive ship writhed in space like a dying animal. The creature was massive beyond imagination, easily the size of Earth's moon. But it was losing. Human ships swarmed around the beast like angry wasps, their black holes nearly invisible against the darkness of space. They fired kinetic rounds that punched through biomechanical armor, launched chemical weapons that burned through alien tissue, and deployed tactics that no military academy would ever teach. "Final assault teams are in position," reported Captain Ryan Bell from the Liberty. His ship had been modified with boarding pods designed for the most dangerous mission of the war, ready to breach the hive core on your command. Morrison nodded. Though Bell could not see him, the plan was insane by any conventional standard. Instead of trying to destroy the hive ship from outside, human forces would board it and fight their way to the central intelligence that controlled the entire swarm network. It was the kind of desperate strategy that only humans would attempt. "All teams execute," Morrison ordered. Boarding pods launched from dozens of human ships, each one carrying Marines trained for close-quarters combat in alien environments. The pods were not sophisticated pieces of technology. They were essentially armored boxes with rockets attached, designed to punch through enemy hulls and deliver soldiers where they were needed most. Sergeant Naya Lopez felt the impact as her pod crashed through the hive ship's outer membrane. The biological walls around her pulsed with sickly light, and the air smelled of decay and metal. She kicked open the pod door and stepped into hell. "Move fast, stay together, and burn everything," Lopez ordered her squad. They had learned during the long months of fighting that the swarm feared fire above all else. The creatures could adapt to energy weapons and absorb most forms of technology, but they had never developed a defense against being burned alive. The Marines moved through corridors that seemed to breathe around them, their flamethrowers clearing paths through masses of writhing tissue. Behind them came engineers with demolition charges, destroying the ship's ability to regenerate damaged sections. Lieutenant Grace Miller moved with a different team, heading for the hive's central intelligence core. Her neural implants had been upgraded repeatedly during the war, allowing her to interface directly with swarm communication networks. She had become humanity's secret weapon against an enemy that relied on perfect coordination. "I can feel it," Miller said as they approached the core chamber. "The hive mind is panicking. It has never faced an enemy inside its own body before. It does not know how to fight us when we are already past its defenses." The core chamber was a vast space filled with pulsing neural networks that stretched from floor to ceiling like a biological computer. At the center sat the Queen Mind, a creature that had orchestrated the consumption of entire star systems. It was beautiful in a terrible way, its crystalline structure glowing with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Miller approached the interface terminals that surrounded the Queen Mind. These were designed for the orderly thoughts of swarm drones, not the chaotic consciousness of a human being. But that chaos was exactly what she needed. "Beginning neural infiltration," Miller reported. She placed her hands on the interface and closed her eyes, projecting her consciousness into the hive network. What she found was panic. The swarm had been created to face logical enemies with predictable responses. But humans had proven to be neither logical nor predictable. Across the galaxy, human forces had violated every principle of civilized warfare. Using tactics that the swarm could not counter because they made no sense, Miller pushed deeper into the network, her chaotic human thoughts spreading like a virus through the ordered intelligence of the hive. She felt the Queen Mind trying to understand her, to categorize her thoughts and find a way to counter them. But human consciousness was too random, too emotional, too utterly alien for the swarm to process. "I can shut it down," Miller transmitted. "The whole network, but I need time." Outside, the battle raged as human forces held off waves of swarm defenders. Captain Tim Anderson led his fighter squadron in a desperate holding action, keeping enemy interceptors away from the boarding teams. Its pilots flew like maniacs, pulling maneuvers that should have been impossible and firing weapons while spinning through debris fields. "They are throwing everything at us," Anderson reported. "But they are making mistakes. Big ones. The hive mind is losing control of its own forces." Dr. Helen Cross monitored the battle from her research station, watching as the swarm's perfect coordination finally broke down completely. "The Queen Mind is trying to maintain control while fighting off Miller's intrusion," she reported. "It cannot do both. The network is collapsing." The collapse was visible across the galaxy. Swarm clusters that had moved with perfect unity suddenly turned on each other. Creatures that had absorbed the technology of dozens species began to malfunction, as conflicting programming tore them apart from within. The hive network that had coordinated the invasion was eating itself alive. "Network breach successful," Miller reported, her voice strained from the mental effort. "The Queen Mind is shutting down. All swarm forces should lose coordination in the next few minutes." Morrison watched from his command deck as the massive hive ship began to convulse. Its biomechanical systems were failing as the central intelligence that controlled them died. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as every swarm creature suddenly found itself alone, cut off from the network that had given its existence meaning. "All human forces, this is Admiral Morrison," he broadcast. "The swarm network has been neutralized. Begin final cleanup operations. The war is over." The celebration was brief, but intense. Human crews across the galaxy allowed themselves a moment to realize they had won. It's not just survived, but actually defeated an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. They had done it using weapons the aliens considered primitive, tactics the aliens considered chaotic, strategies the aliens considered insane. 2 weeks later, Morrison found himself back on Nexus Prime, standing in the same council chamber, where humanity had been rejected months earlier, but this time, the atmosphere was very different. The surviving alien representatives looked at him with expressions, ranging from gratitude to awe to barely concealed fear. Ambassador Lisa Carter, now bearing the title of Secretary General of the Reformed Galactic Alliance, spoke first. "Admiral Morrison, on behalf of the surviving species of this galaxy, I want to thank you for humanity's intervention in the war against the Void Swarm." The Zephyrian representative, one of the few survivors of their proud fleet, stepped forward. "We owe you an apology, Admiral. We dismissed your species as too primitive for galactic warfare. We were wrong. Your methods may be unconventional, but they were exactly what was needed to defeat an enemy we could not understand." Morrison looked around the chamber, taking in the faces of beings who had once considered humanity beneath their notice. "They fought the way we had to fight," he said simply. "The swarm was not an enemy that could be defeated with perfect formations or superior technology. It had to be fought with chaos, desperation, and a willingness to break every rule of civilized combat." The crystalline representative spoke through its harmonic vibrations. "We have studied your tactics during the war. Your methods appear random, but there is a pattern underneath the chaos. It is a pattern we do not understand, but we recognize its effectiveness." General Marcus Stone, standing beside Morrison, nodded. "Human warfare evolved on a planet where survival meant being unpredictable. Every human alive today exists because our ancestors were too stubborn to die and too crazy to give up. Those same qualities served us well against the swarm." The formal ceremonies continued for hours, but the real changes were already underway across the galaxy. The Terran Defense Academy was being established to train alien officers in human tactical flexibility. Coalition fleets were being restructured to incorporate human command methods, the rigid doctrines that had failed so catastrophically against. The swarm were being replaced with adaptive strategies that could change as quickly as human thought. Captain Sarah Johnson, now promoted to admiral and commander of the new integrated defense force, oversaw the training programs. "Are learning," she reported to Morrison. "Slowly, but they are learning. The Zephyrians are starting to break formation when needed. Crystalline beings are experimenting with improvised tactics. It will take time, but they are beginning to understand that chaos can be a weapon." Dr. Kevin Walsh continued his research into human neural patterns, now with unlimited funding and support from every major species. His discoveries about human consciousness and its effects on artificial intelligence were revolutionizing technology across the galaxy. Ships with human AI interfaces were becoming the new standard for military and civilian use alike. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. No longer were humans seen as primitive newcomers, unworthy of respect. They were recognized as the species that had saved the galaxy when all conventional methods failed.